Adi, if I look at your profile, I look at the companies you worked at, it sounds like the dream of every parent. I want this guy to work at big tech, work at big consulting, and you did that. And you spent what, almost a decade, 7, 8 years at
7 years.
McKinsey, 7 years at
Yeah.
McKinsey. And at that point, you're like, you know what? I'm gonna leave the corporate world and start my own company. So maybe just talk to me about what led to that decision.
Yeah, it's a few separate things. McKinsey is this like it's an extraordinary place to work at. You get really cool problems to solve. You work with people who I think you just learn a lot from. And then after 7 years, I felt like I was coming to a point where at the time I was an associate partner. And so either I would have to really like dedicate myself to becoming a partner at McKinsey, which is, not something easy. You have to really believe in it. You have to spend a lot of time doing it. Or I would have to think of, is this really something I want? Was the future and the reward for being a partner something I want, or did I want something different? And I felt at the time that what I was really interested in was having like a broader impact on through building something. And at the time, of course, like the whole AI wave was just taking off, right? So, post November 2022 with ChatGPT and then with all of the other releases after the release of GPT-4 in particular, I had started coming to the realization that, wow, this stuff is like getting better much faster. And then the more I read into it and I started realizing, oh, wow, actually, this is a predictable, speed of improvement in terms of the scaling laws. It's actually something that has massive investment going on in terms of all of the AI capex, et cetera. I was like, well, this is a wave just like the year, the tech boom of the year 2000. And I'd always had this feeling of, yeah, I was too young for that first tech boom. I was, in school maybe for the start of the mobile era. I was maybe not ready to take a risk at the start of the cloud and the SaaS era. But now there's one come along, and am I just going to, not take part? Like, am I going to be on the sidelines, or am I actually going to do something? And so I was like, yeah, all right, I definitely want to do something. And then I kept getting obsessed with this idea of like the fact that now we have robots that can speak natural language is just mind blowing. It's from all of our sci-fi of Star Trek and everything. So it's like I got to do something in this. And so one thing led to another. I was like, okay, I had a great time at McKinsey, but it's time to do something on my own.
You know what? It's interesting because it reminds me of there's this famous quote from Bezos. He said like I looked at the numbers of number of internet users. I'm not sure if you know that.
Right.
He was looking at it and he's like, oh, it grew by like X amount, X% in just a few months or a few years. So he's like, okay, you know what? That's a huge opportunity. I got to do something about it. Is
Exactly.
that the same feeling? Like you're just seeing everything exploding and you're like, okay, I want to jump in.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny you mentioned Bezos because like he talks about that thing called regret minimization. And he made his decision to leave, I think it was to leave DE Shaw and do Amazon with the kind of logic you mentioned, based on thinking of, okay, like what would he regret the most? Would it be staying at DE Shaw or would it be like, forming this company? And he's felt like, okay, even if it failed, he would learn so much and he would be riding that exponential to your point that it's probably worth it. And I have the same kind of feeling that it's, success or failure probably isn't uh, as much in my hands, but it's the inputs that I can put in to make something great and then feel really great about it. And that's what's most important to me.
Awesome. So let me ask you this before we move into the company. When you were working at McKinsey, were you like, I mean, just because I've never worked in consultancy. So is it like you work on different projects, you finish a project, you start a new one, or you're overseeing different projects? So by the end of your career there, what was your day to day like? Do you have like multiple things at the same time ongoing? You see different problems, or you finish something, then you start something else? How does that go?
Yeah, so when you're earlier in tenure, like the business analyst engagement manager role, you're doing, one project at a time. You're kind of dedicated to that for anywhere between 2 weeks to 3 months, even 6 months at a time. But then as you get more tenured, you become an associate partner, which is where I'd gotten to. You have multiple things going on at once. So multiple clients, multiple projects. You have large teams underneath you. And so you're really, brought in to um really engage with the clients at a senior level, but also like do some of the toughest problem solvings with the teams there.
And did that influence your decision at all? Like, were you seeing projects AI related, or was it like a personal research that you were doing on the side?
Yeah, no, so I was actually working on a lot of tech and data stuff, and actually in my last year at McKinsey, I was one of the people leading the Gen AI for CIOs service line that we had there. So I was very close to that work. One thing I realized is that industry is slow, and we have this kind of exponential improvement in capabilities, but it was going to take very long even to convince firms who should be doing this that hey, they should be adopting AI because they're naturally very risk averse. And then this being such a probabilistic technology, there was going to be so much energy spent just convincing people that it's the right thing to do for them, right? And so I was also a little bit like, well, if this thing is taking off and I really believe in it so much and I can see the capability step changes with every release, do I want to spend time just, lagging what the leading edge was, or do I want to find a way to get on the leading edge and kind of maximize it? And what had happened was as I was learning more and more about it, I was obviously using it more and more in my personal life. And particularly for coding, it got to a point where I was like, wait, like I've never been a software engineer, but I was a solutions architect before, so I was like semi-technical. And I'd never become a software engineer because it was like always so hard to like set up your environment, debug, and like do these things. But then with GPT-4 at the time, I was just telling it what was wrong, and it was giving me enough instruction that I could understand and build something. And I was like, okay, this is only gonna get better. Like, isn't this the right time now to like go all in and just figure it out? So that became my decision. This kind of contrast between the way I was maximizing in my private life versus whereas in my professional life it was still a bit more kind of restricted, definitely led me to make that decision. Yeah.
You know what? It's interesting. I've had a bunch of partners from big consulting as well, and I think all of them moved into having their own consultancy firm. I don't think any of them started their own app or their own company like the way you're doing right now. Did you consider it? Do you think like you had the experience and you had the knowledge to start a consultancy? Was that part of your options?
Yeah, I considered very briefly. So the way I've kind of understood AI is that it's actually not something that is built, right? It's something that is grown. And what that means is that you actually have to understand the biology of it. You have to live with it and use it a lot more to actually then consult about it. And so my point being, I felt like, okay, even if I may want to do consulting again at some point, I will be a better person and a more knowledgeable expert if I actually build something, run it in production, and I really understand the nuances and like the jagged edges as they call it, right, for AI. Like you have to build an intuition for this stuff. It's not something that you can write a slide about. You actually have to build a product, then you can write the slide. And so yeah, I thought about it for a little while, but for me it was always no, build something, learn, drive some growth on that thing. And I was fine. Frankly, I was looking for my life's work. I was not. When you're a consultant, you're kind of you're a temporary part of the story in whatever narrative you go into, which is great. You're an important part of it, but you're a temporary part of it. But could I take a story from start to finish? Could I do something that's more my life's work kind of thing? Was my intention.
So talk to me about it. So what is Socratify?
Yeah, so Socratify is a career skills AI coach. The idea is it has 2-minute dialogues with you about topics you enjoy or mock interviews or about learning concepts. And through those 2-minute dialogues with AI through natural language, it then gives you feedback on, hey, here's how you were thinking, here's a different way to think about it, or here's how you could improve how you communicate. And so the idea is it's targeted at people who are looking for their first job, their first promotion, their first career change and helping them get better at the professional skills that really matter now, which is critical thinking, the ability to think creatively and apply different concepts to different areas. It's inspired like from the name you probably imagine it's inspired by Socrates and with the intent of you can actually learn through dialogue. Um, and so the whole point of this was invert what all of the other AI companies are doing, which is they're all giving answers. Socratify is asking questions. And so I think of it sort of like a Duolingo for your career goals. Just tell it what your career goal is, and it sets up an interactive curriculum made up of these 2-minute dialogues that help you get better every day. Yeah, exactly. Like my whole thesis on this was actually in a world of abundant intelligence, we're at a point where how you think is more important than what you know.
Mm.
And so, what is the thing that you do that's kind of like the gym for your body, right? Like you practice how you think. And I was just thinking like there's nothing that is actually sorry, one of the things that does help you do this well is the case method in business schools. And I'd been to business school before McKinsey, which was to me it was always fascinating that actually this is something where you operate from an area where everyone kind of knows the facts and the facts are very usually pretty simple and obvious, but then through discussion you kind of uncover the nuance and complexity of it, which was very similar to how things worked at McKinsey too, right? You're brought into these situations where through the dialogues and through articulating the strategic narrative and through kind of disseminating that narrative through discussion is how you kind of define the strategy. It's like it's a dialogical process. And I think a lot of the way the world of work is going on, as you said, is more ending up towards it's more important with how you articulate, how you think, how you connect the dots in different ways. Like that's the stuff that AI is not going to be as good at. Of course, it will help with that, but it's not going to be as good as that. Whereas the classical skills that, coding is one, but from a consulting side, it's something like creating an Excel spreadsheet. I think the first 2 years at the firm, I spent like really getting great at Excel. I know all the keyboard shortcuts, and I can freaking, make an Excel without touching my mouse at all, and in record time. But that skill is over, right? Like just this week, they released Claude for financial services. It can make a better spreadsheet than I can. It can make a better spreadsheet than I would say 90% of the consultants that I know. So what's the skill that's left? It's what kind of model do you want to create? What is the model telling you? And then, hey, what happens if we change this? Or hey, did we think of this? Did we incorporate X effect? And those are the kinds of like the paths of thinking I want to help to practice. I want to help people build that muscle to do that. So yeah.
I really love how you're emphasizing critical thinking, not just like the words that are coming out of your mouth. I'll tell you why, because a lot of the time when I was starting my career, people used to tell me, you have to get into consultancy because it really shapes your mind. You have to get into consultancy because you get to know different businesses, you get to know how to solve things, how to be a problem solver, more than actually doing the work at the company. It just helps you think in a different way. And I feel like this is what you're using your domain expertise to teach people who didn't have the opportunity to, because sometimes you feel like you need years of experience to get through the interview. And
Mm.
it's kind of the other way around because you don't really know how they operate, especially if you're starting off your career. Is that kind of what you're doing?
Yeah, exactly. And I actually spent like a couple of months like reading not philosophy books, but books about critical thinking and articles about critical thinking and trying to get a sense of, hey, like is this something that is is it a distinct skill or is it a domain level skill? Like do you need to understand a domain to think critically or do you need to think critically and then layer on the domain knowledge? And of course the answer is it's a bit of both. But the takeaway I did have was that actually there are some common things about critical thinking, some common patterns that you then apply on your domain knowledge. And so for example, you always think about, hey, what's the first order effect? What's the second order effect? Or what's the key underlying assumption? Or what would invalidate this? Like there's a common set of questions, which even in your work life, if you think about it, a lot of times you're kind of applying a common set of questions to different situations. And that's the ability to think critically. That is kind of a skill a muscle that you need to build. And by the way, the best people I worked with at McKinsey, they were always the ones who in a meeting or any situation, they understood the situation quickly and they asked really great questions. And I was like, how can I build that skill? Because that skill is the most important one. And that's exactly what I want to try to do with Socratify.
Interesting. And it's not just interviewing. It's kind of your partner along the way. You clearly mentioned that even if you're in the company, because sometimes I asked myself years ago, why do some people get promoted and others don't? And I looked it up and like I did a lot of research on it. I asked around, and the short answer was some people just ask for it. Like
Yeah.
some people
Yeah.
just know how to ask. And I think it's part of this critical thinking that you were talking about. Is like if you know you deserve more, you should be able to speak up. You should be able to talk about it. I mean, it's not just you get in the company. What you're offering is something that help you grow inside your journey, during your journey.
Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. That's the intent. Like, and I think like generally in industry, the other platforms like they focus purely on interviewing, or there are others that are purely focused on internal learning, like the LMSs and your learning management systems and all that kind of stuff. Whereas I'm trying to bridge that gap and say, hey, Socratify is it's your career skills coach for that early part of your career. Um, yeah, I just think that these skills are going to be more and more important, but also the threat to those skills has also increasingly increased. Like you've probably seen the papers that have come out about cognitive offloading and how ChatGPT decreases critical thinking skills, etc. I am positioning Socratify to be something that can help you pass that and help you actually continue to build and strengthen the muscles for being able to think critically
Yeah,
throughout your
this
career.
this this debate is ongoing. Like, is it making us stupider or is it making us better? Like the whole
Exactly.
idea behind AI, like every time you present anything, you're like, no, it empowers you, it enhances you. Like one
Yeah.
person is now more efficient. But then you read those papers about younger people that really don't think anymore. They don't need to. Like, imagine if you were young and you had ChatGPT, wouldn't you be tempted to use it? Of course you would.
You're so busy, you'd have to, and that's the worry. Like the education system will not adapt as quickly as the technology is changing, right? And so we're going to end up with a situation where the people companies are trying to hire are missing some of these very basic skills. And so something like Socratify can actually help not just with prepping those people, the people to work and to interview, but also once they join a company to help them get up to speed with what's happening in the industry. So like one of the things that I think is unique about Socratify is I actually take like the news that happens or like earnings calls, transcripts, and all the like public information that these companies announce, and I turn those into short discussions. So, for example, one of the ones I added last week was Apple bought the rights to Formula One streaming from next year onwards. And so, if you're a marketing manager at Apple or you want to be a marketing manager at Apple, it's actually an interesting discussion to have. Like, why does that matter? Or how can that be used to drive increasing subscriptions for Apple services? Is Formula One even the right sport they should have done, or should they have done something like, I don't know, the NFL or baseball or something? Like, why was Formula One the right choice? How does that fit with Apple's strategy? And now that they have it, how could they use it to further grow? Like, there's so many interesting questions from just that piece of news. So yeah, so like I basically have this pipeline that I take official company announcements and turn them into these short interactive discussions, and then it's the AI is set up in a way that it gives you feedback on whatever you said about that.
Adi, I love it because you're not talking hypotheticals. It's the real deal. Like it's
Exactly.
if you were in an interview right now, this would probably come up. They would
Yeah,
probably ask you about it.
exactly. Exactly. Like one of my goals, like my hero moment for the app is someone uses it, goes into the interview, and their interviewer says, "Hey, you are actually more informed about this than I am." Like to me, that would be like a hero moment that I'm aiming for, just to do that for one person.
So now that you're in the trenches, you've been in the trenches for a year. What was the biggest challenge? I mean, you're corporate wise, if we look at your history, it's the perfect CV. But starting a company is different. So what has been the biggest lesson learned?
Ooh, so many. Where do I start? I mean, the biggest lesson is that distribution is more important than anything else. And that's going to be true now, especially that the cost of creation has gone to zero. Um,
Basically.
and yeah, exactly. And our attention spans they're not just limited now, but they're very fragmented. The effect of social platforms with short form video and just like the high dopamine lives that we live means that like you have to really find a way to stand out no matter like you were saying earlier, like no matter how good your product is, it's the distribution that really matters. And so like focusing on that as much as possible, I think has been an increasing priority for me. Um, that's maybe one obvious lesson, I guess. The other thing is more like personal. I definitely have this thing where, uh, because maybe because I was at McKinsey, but also from my personality is I want to have things structured. I want to have things prepared. I want to do the next step only when the last five are solid. And I see that in my product development process where I'm like reluctant to like release and market something until I feel very strongly that, okay, yeah, this is as good as it could be. And so just finding a way to tell myself it's okay that it even that it sucks. It's okay that people are going to use it and tell me that it's bad. But what's more important is like get people to use it and like get the nuanced feedback that okay, what would actually help make this better for them? Like just being more open to um not being perfect. Because at McKinsey in particular, the bar was very high. And so you would not just try to do something well, you try to do it at a really high quality level. You would still obviously you'd 80/20 stuff, but the 20 that you do has to be perfect. So yeah, learning to be
I
okay with
see
that.
why this is a extreme big mental conflict because when you're in a startup mode, you gotta release, you gotta get the feedback from the people. If you keep waiting and iterating and you have your little tunnel vision trying to fix things that maybe don't need fixing, I mean, that's
Exactly.
you gotta keep releasing. Anyways, I'm gonna end with this. Is it weird to be on your own? Because you were always surrounded by, you had people above, next to you, people who worked for you, with you. Now that you're by yourself, is it strange?
It is strange, but it has been less so because of how good the AI is getting. So from a social standpoint, it is strange. I find it was so much fun to have people around who are like engaged. They care about the problem they were solving. They would bring different ideas and stuff. So I think that was an incredible feeling and an incredible way to work. It is totally different now. I use AI to build extensively, and so I don't feel the gap from a building standpoint or from a skill standpoint. I do feel the gap more from a social standpoint, and more to the point of at McKinsey in particular, there was this they call the obligation to dissent, where if you think something is wrong, like even if someone senior says it and they give their opinion, you don't just say yes because that person said it. You have an obligation to dissent. And so I missed that because like everything we did would have like a lot of really productive disagreement and debate that made our end product get better. I miss having that for sure. But I also think that the old kind of org structures that we had are they're kind of extinct at this point with AI. If you maximize the use of AI, you can have very different org structures. You will have these single person companies that will grow to be quite large. I mean, if you see even in stats, right, a lot of the more AI native firms have a much higher revenue to headcount ratio. So I think that is going to be increasingly common. Um, I would love at some point to have, more headcount, but I want to do that after I get like true product market fit, and then can scale based on, bootstrapping it better. Maybe one thing I didn't mention before is that right now I haven't taken any funding or any VC money yet, because I do strongly believe there's new ways of building organizations. I'd love to. One of my idols, I think, is the Basecamp. You may have heard of them. They're built by DHH, who's he built Ruby on Rails and another couple of things. I think the VC path is just a whole different set of ways of operating and risk, and like it's more of the fail fast mentality, whereas for me again this was like, no, this is actually more, I feel like this is more my life's work, so I want to be able to build it sustainably. Hence I'm taking this maybe slower approach, that I hope will succeed. Let's see.
I mean, it really sounds like you're enjoying this. And I'll tell you what, I really love what you're doing. And it
Thank you.
was super fun talking to you. Adi, thanks so much for doing
You
this.
too. You too. Thank you, Antoine.